The date is Tuesday, June 22. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. The Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, JPS, has applied for a tariff adjustment. That's the word from the Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR. JPS is proposing several adjustments, including an average adjustment of 3.5% of the non-fuel tariff. JPS is assuming average fuel and independent power producers' rates of $25.85 per kilowatt hour and $14.41 per kilowatt hour, respectively. JPS has proposed a total bill impact, including fuel and IPP charges, of 3.8% for a typical residential customer and 2.2% for small business customers. The island's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jacqueline Mackenzie, is warning against a false sense of security as Jamaica's COVID-19 figures trend downward. The positivity rate tracks the number of new cases. However, she says though the country's daily positivity rate is now hovering around 10%, it's still too high.
In terms of, though, where do we want to go with the positivity rate? I want persons to recognize that even at a 10% positivity rate, we are at a high positivity rate. We have been as high as almost 40% positivity rate. However, where we need to get to is below 5% for us to feel comfortable or a little more comfortable in terms of releasing any restrictions that there are. So while it is that some restrictions have been released, we would encourage persons to be very, very cautious, to limit their chance of exposure, because there is still a fairly high positivity rate and a high chance of exposure in country.
Mrs. Mackenzie was speaking at last Thursday's virtual COVID-19 conversation. As Jamaica's tourism moves to rebound from the challenges brought on by COVID-19, the island has recorded close to 1 million visitors since reopening the doors to its tourism sector in June 2020. Speaking at a recent event hosted by the NCB Capital Markets, Portfolio Minister Edmund Bartlett says the recovery of the industry must be a priority.
A recovery for tourism cannot be based on business as usual. A meaningful recovery for tourism for the Caribbean cannot be one where less than 10% on average of the US dollar earned from tourism is retained in the Caribbean. I make that point because it is one of great pain to me. And even though Jamaica has done better than most, in that we were at 30 cents to the dollar when I became minister in the last iteration, and now we're, well, before COVID we were at 40.5, which is tremendous improvement. But DOMREP is at 50. And it's only Jamaica and DOMREP that stands in that position of having a reasonably high retention level. But the reason the retention level is so low is a lack of capacity to supply on the demand of tourism.
According to the minister, arrivals over the one-year period have delivered an estimated earnings of $1.312 billion, of which US $97.5 million would have accrued directly to the government. NCB Capital Markets Chief Operating Officer Tracy Spence says the tourism sector remains vulnerable to exogenous shocks.
The unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic shocked the world and depressed the Caribbean and Latin American economy by 7% in 2020, interrupting businesses, reducing private consumption, and generating steep economic fallout in investments, primarily for tourism-dependent economies.
Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, is praising the Association of Jamaicans in China for its support. The Association of Jamaicans in China was initiated by the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council Asia-Pacific Region Representative Dr. Nicolene Johnson. And Senator Johnson-Smith says this link is a tool for deeper engagement with the diaspora. She made the comments while speaking at a digital town hall meeting hosted by Prime Minister Andrew Holness last week.
Senator Johnson-Smith says the group was instrumental in keeping Jamaicans in China connected with those at home.
and they were of fantastic support and assistance when we were in the heart of the pandemic, when, of course, China was in the throes of its experience before it had reached Jamaica, and liaising with our students and other teachers and members of the Jamaican community there. That association will remain to be a tool and a mechanism for outreach, as well as our mission.
She says Dr. Johnson will liaise with representatives of Jamaica's mission to China to sustain and create trade links.
In respect of trade, which the Prime Minister referred to, certainly in respect of bauxite, export of bauxite for aluminium, you know that GISCO had started operations here and upgrading our plants here. And that alone had doubled the trade outflows between Jamaica and China. And let's also remember that live and frozen lobster are now products that we export to China, and Minister Green and Minister Shaw have been working on including sea cucumbers and other seafood, which are delicacies and niches that Jamaica can provide in amounts which are small in the Chinese context, of course, but of significant impact to our trade balance.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says aspects of Jamaica's diaspora economic potential remains untapped, and his administration is working to open avenues of mutual financial and social development. Addressing a prime ministerial town hall meeting held as part of a virtual Jamaica Diaspora Sustainability Symposium last week, he said support from the Jamaican diaspora has been a critical lifeline for the country during the coronavirus pandemic.
Beyond sending remittances, the diaspora continues to promote trade and foreign direct investment, spur entrepreneurship, create new businesses, and transfer knowledge and skills. Despite all this support, this powerful reservoir of capital, expertise, and relationships remains largely untapped relative to its potential. According to a 2017 study by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, the unrealized economic potential of the diaspora represents, at a minimum, US $1.5 billion annually, US dollars. This potential, if realized, can catalyze the growth and development of Jamaica. My government is committed to seeking increased engagement in our diaspora to harness this tremendous pool of dynamic expertise and priceless human capital towards the development of our country.
The two-day symposium was held under the theme Jamaica and the Diaspora, Stronger Together for a Sustainable Future. It was organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade with support from various partners. A curfew has been imposed in sections of Kingston Central. It began at 7 p.m. on Monday and will remain in effect until 7 p.m. Wednesday, June 23. The required boundaries are north along East Queen Street from the intersection of Hanover Street to the intersection of South Camp Road. East along South Camp Road from the intersection of East Queen Street to the intersection of Water Lane. South along Water Lane from the intersection of South Camp Road to the intersection of Hanover Street, and west along Hanover Street from the intersection of Water Lane to the intersection of East Queen Street. We now get the latest market updates in this quick business report with Gabriel Thompson.
In Monday's trading session, the JSE Combined Index advanced by 1,293 points to close at over 439,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 95 stocks, of which 40 advanced, 42 declined, and 13 traded firm. The Junior Market Index advanced by 2 points to close at over 3,000 units. Stocks advanced for Access Financial Services Limited, Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, and Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 1834 Investments Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Trading firm were Cargo Handlers Limited, Community and Workers of Jamaica CCU Deferred Share, and Derrimont Trading Company Limited. Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited was the volume leader with 1.5 million units, followed by Wigton Wind Farm Limited Ordinary Shares with 1.3 million units, and Mayberry Investments Limited with over 950,000 units. In foreign exchange trading for Monday, June 21, the US dollar sold for an average $150.71. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $123.41. The pound sterling traded for $208.45, and the euro sold for an average $181.03. In market data for oil, Brent crude futures added 0.41 points to $74.49 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude slid 0.42 cents to settle at $72.70 a barrel. And on that note, we close this Tuesday edition of the Business Report Inside the News on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson. Pleasant viewing.
We go over now to news from the region. In the Bahamas, the Prime Minister has announced several changes to the country's emergency order, including shortened curfew hours and additional perks for fully vaccinated individuals. Jasmine Brown of Our News has the details.
One of the biggest announcements the Prime Minister made during his communication today was the lifting of some restrictions, including the extension of curfews across the Bahamas. On New Providence and Abaco, the daily curfew will move to 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., while Grand Bahamas curfew is now midnight to 5 a.m.
Cat Island will be moved to 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. North and Central Andros will move to 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. There is no longer a curfew for the Berry Islands, South Andros, which includes Mangrove Key.
That was not the only change announced in Parliament today.
The PCR test requirement for travel to and from Cat Island and Andros will be removed immediately. PCR testing to travel from Grand Bahama will be removed effective immediately.
Travel visa fees will also be eliminated for fully vaccinated residents who are returning to the Bahamas as of July 1st. Minister also relaxed restrictions for weddings and funerals effective immediately.
New Providence funeral and memorial services will now be permitted in a church or other indoor facility in accordance with the health protocols of the Bahamas Christian Council.
However, he stressed that repasts are still not permitted on New Providence and Paradise Island, Grand Bahama, mainland Abaco, Eleuthera, Harbor Island, Great Exuma, and Little Exuma.
The number of people allowed to gather in groups on beaches and parks will be increased from 5 to 15 on New Providence and Paradise Island, Grand Bahama mainland Abaco, Eleuthera, Harbor Island, Great and Little Exuma.
When it comes to the promised vaccination day, when fully vaccinated individuals can enjoy the suspension of emergency order restrictions, Minister said this will take place once health officials determine that a sufficient number of the eligible population has been vaccinated. In the meantime,
private gatherings and other social events in your homes and elsewhere may now be held provided all the attendees are fully vaccinated. Wedding receptions will now be permitted on New Providence and Grand Bahama, provided that all attendees are fully vaccinated.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
In Guyana, more than 3 weeks after the Ministry of Health announced that it ran out of second doses of the Sputnik coronavirus vaccine, health officials are still unable to provide a timeline for their arrival. Gordon Mosley reports.
More than 3 weeks after the Ministry of Health announced that it ran out of the second doses for the Sputnik coronavirus vaccine, health officials are still unable to provide any definite timeline for the arrival of the second doses. More than 100,000 persons are awaiting their second dose of the Russian-made vaccine. Both doses are required for someone to be fully immunized and get maximum protection against COVID-19. The Health Ministry has, however, indicated that persons are still within the timeline to get their second shot. The ministry has advised that a second dose could be administered between 4 to 12 weeks after the first dose. But many persons who have already been administered the first dose have taken to social media to complain about the absence of that second dose. The health minister today said there is still no definitive timeline for the arrival of the second dose. He said the health ministry is hoping that the vaccines will arrive sooner. He also said that 3 weeks ago.
We keep working to make sure that we can get it. Part of the challenge right now is that in Moscow, as you would know from the epi data that is available right now, you would see that there are spikes in Moscow with the Delta variant, and that might be one of the reasons why we are having difficulty in getting the supplies that are needed, because in Russia they have updated or they have accelerated vaccination of their own population. But we are working to see how fast we can get those second doses in. But just to reiterate that second dose, you can get your second dose between 4 weeks and 12 weeks. So those persons who are expecting their second dose anytime between this time period would be good. So you don't have to just think about just 4 weeks after. You anytime in between 4 weeks to 12 weeks. Once you get it within that time frame, you'll be fine.
According to the Ministry of Health, a total of 98,635 persons have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Of that number, the health minister has indicated that over 59,000 of those persons were fully vaccinated with Sputnik. Last Friday, his advisor, Dr. Leslie Ramzami, claimed that the figure was about 61,000. A total of 227,690 persons have received the first dose of the coronavirus vaccines being administered in Guyana, with the majority of people receiving the Sputnik vaccine. The Ministry of Health has been mum on the number of people awaiting their second dose. Based on figures released by the Ministry of Health, Guyana has so far received 305,000 doses of the Sputnik vaccine, with the ministry indicating that more than 59,000 persons were fully vaccinated by the time they ran out of second doses. It means that the country received more first doses than it ordered and more first doses than second doses. The health minister indicated that the country ordered and paid for 200,000 first doses and 200,000 second doses, a total of 400,000 vaccines. But based on figures released by the ministry, it appears as though the country received more than 245,000 first doses of Sputnik, representing an excess of 45,000. The ministry has not furnished answers to several questions posed by news source on the discrepancies. While the other two vaccines being administered, Sinopharm and AstraZeneca, use the same vaccine as the first and second dose, Sputnik uses two totally different vaccines.
The disconnection drive by the Water and Sewage Authority, WASA, in Trinidad and Tobago has been scrapped. Minister of Public Utilities Marvin Gonzalez said he was not privy to any discussion on the disconnection drive and described it as ill-timed. TTT's Sherilyn Lewis reports.
Acknowledging that the Water and Sewage Authority initiated its disconnection drive as a means of debt recovery, Line Minister Marvin Gonzalez said persons congregating outside WASA's branch offices to pay their arrears during a state of emergency goes against the Ministries of Health COVID-19 protocols.
The decision rather to commence a disconnection drive in Trinidad and Tobago was one that was started by management. No approval was sought from the board of directors, and no approval.
And should they have done that? Should they have sought approval from the board?
I think they should have sought. They should have gone to the board and seek the necessary approval, especially given the fact that we're in the midst of a global pandemic.
Minister Gonzalez stressed that water rates is an operational function which falls within the purview of management and not the board or minister.
And I would dare say, especially given the situation that we're in now as a country, at least the Minister of Public Utilities should have been made aware so that I could have I could have given my perspective on the matter.
Minister Gonzalez said the board met last Friday and the chairman of WASA was asked to report on the scrapped disconnection drive.
We asked Dr. Seeley to more or less explain, what led to the disconnection drive, whether certain things would have been taken into consideration. And that there it was confirmed that the entire board was not aware of it. And we expressed how we felt about it. And I think coming out of that meeting, the disconnection drive was discontinued.
The debt recovery action was announced last Wednesday. Charlene Lewis, TTT News.
In sports, we go to cricket. Craig Brathwaite has defended changes to the West Indies side in the wake of their heavy drubbing at the hands of South Africa, arguing they had no impact on the home side's abject performance in the two-test series. West Indies have not won a single. Anna Powell, Shai Hope, Roston Chase and Jason Holder with 19-year-old Jaden Seals handed his debut. And that's the news. Thanks as always for making it PBCJ, the People's Station.